Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us on our 7th live webinar. My name is Jose Luis Merchan. I'll be guiding us through our webinar today. Our topic today is on MongoDB, and we have a couple of examples to show you how to connect to a Mongo database, what's actually required to get a good connection from your local suite, and how to interact with the database in order to do all the queries you can ever need. And we are going to go over a couple of examples on how to do each query. So first, let's think about why is it good to get a MongoDB or any NoSQL database up and running on your project. Well, maybe the best 3-pointer is that they work with a flexible data model, and that's very good because you don't ever have to worry about deploying problems on your production database, because most of the difference between the structure and the of whatever you are inserting, it's directly related to the documents itself, and the database has no constraints as to what you are saving on each collection. So that's very good. Blazedpath works with both flexible data models and undefined data models, so you have complete flexibility to work with either. If you want to convert your flexible data from a MongoDB and convert it to a strongly typed data or objects, you can do it with no problem. So that's a very good advantage to using these NoSQL databases. Another good point is that they have elastic capability. That basically means that they are built for the cloud, and whenever you need to scale your database, you just assign more software, and it's a very seemingly easy process to upgrade your database size and responsiveness and the performance. And as I just said, as many and all modern database, they are high performance, so you don't ever have to worry about performance issues. So let's quickly go over this lovely table of contents we have today. We are going to go over how to actually connect to a Mongo database. Then we are going to make a quick check of connection to the database. Then we are using the expression engine to start making the queries against the database. We are going to be using the Blocky editor we covered on previous webinars. If you remember from previous webinars, or if you haven't, just know that we have a series of webinars with a lot of information of different features from the Blazedpath suite and the Blazedpath cloud to create deploys. We have a full series of tutorials to build a game from scratch in the YouTube channel. I think there's a playlist there for the tutorials and for the webinars. On the webinars, we've covered how to create screens, how to navigate from the screens, how to use the Blocky editor and the expressions editor to manage the behavior, and we've covered a big number of features. We are far from done, though. So today we are going to be covering how to connect and use Mongo databases. And to do that, let me just quickly jump over to my... There we go. To make the presentation for today, we are going to be using a demo database from cloud, from the MongoDB cloud. To create a database in the MongoDB cloud is a very easy process. You just do a couple of clicks and you get access to a testing cluster. So let me open the testing project. The reason I'm showing you this screen right now is because as long as I'm going to be connecting to and making queries on the database, and I'm going to be showing you the results in the cloud itself on this collections section. So you can see that actually everything that I'm doing locally, it's being impacted here. So I have a collections. This is my first database. That's actually the name of the database. There's 3 types of collections, which we are not going to cover the other 2 collections right now because they are from the BPM engine. But we are going to focus on just a collection named collection webinar. So how do you actually go from creating your database to actually using the database on the Blazedpath suite? So to actually connect to the database from the Blazedpath suite, you would go and open a workspace. Then on the workspace, you would create a solution. Basically, we are using a very simple and bare bones solution, so it's a very quick. So the tests we do today are very quick. The solution in here, it's just called Webinar 7, and it's twofold. There's only 2 components. There's a MongoDB component and there is a microservice. The reason we are keeping it very simple today is, again, so that the tests are quick and we can go through a lot of tests in this half an hour. So to actually connect to a solution, you would go to the menu on your left and grab a MongoDB icon, drop it into the canvas and name it something. MongoDB number 2. And this would add another MongoDB. In the way it is right now, there would be 2 instances of a MongoDB. We're just going to be using one today, but if you want to add a separate connection, or you have many non-relational databases for your projects because you have a lot of endpoints and the information is distributed, you would just add more icons and you would then use the information from the URL connections with the user and passwords, the database, and that's pretty much it. I'm going to delete this icon so that the connection is quicker. And the way to actually pass over the information for the connection is you would go to the environment configuration, this little gear over on the top right that is next to the run button. You click on the gear and you can see here they have different configurable information for the microservice and the MongoDB database. So you would click on edit in here and you have a field to complete a URL and with a password and the user and the name of the database. As we just saw, the database name is my first database, so that's why this is here, and this is the URL of the database. The place where this comes from is basically whenever you go to databases, on the clusters, you would click on the connect button here, and then you go connect your application, and it's going to give you the URL with the URL for your cluster and your database. We are just grabbing the base URL, so don't grab anything else that comes after the slash, because that's like one line for everything. And in Blazedpath we use the base URL. You will have to use the user and the password if you configure another one. And if you just follow the tutorial on what you have to do, just remember that you do have on the cloud MongoDB, you do have to let the cloud know what's your IP, so you can give it access to the database from the page, because it's a two-sided authentication. So that's where this comes from. There's no just follow the tutorials from the MongoDB database. It's very easy. So we are going to go back to the collections, because we are going to start making the queries. So the first thing we are going to do to check that the connection is live and well and it's working, we are going to be executing a console log blockis command, which basically I'm going to be executing expressions, and the resulting value of the evaluation of the expression is going to be thrown on the console log. And that's going to run on an event from the microservice that executes whenever I click on run. So I click on run, microservice start, the event on start starts, and everything that's on the blocky for the start event is going to be executed, and hence it's going to come to the console log. So I'm going to be using a little bit of zoom so you guys can see the font a little bigger. Okay, so I'm going to come to the Solution Explorer, and I'm going to be using the onStart event. If you're following along at home and you don't see the onStart event whenever you add a microservice, just right click on the microservice, go new, and then you will see here the onStart event. I don't have it right now on this list because it's already added in here, but yeah, whenever you add a microservice and you click go new here, you will see the onStart event. So everything that's in here in this function, which again it's we are going to be using the blocky editor and the expressions editor to do all our tests today. And we've covered a little bit of detail on the blocky editor itself and why it's why we chose why Blazedpath uses it basically everywhere. We use the same language across all elements, front ends, back ends, microservices, databases. We use it everywhere. So you learn it once, which is basically drag and drop of different assessments. So it's very easy to pick up. So that being said, I'm going to be using basically one or two commands in here, which are basically the console logs. So we have a console log, and whatever I write in this expressions editor is going to be evaluated and thrown into the console log. So let's again go back to the check for the connection status, and we are going to go MongoDB, and we are going to be using a function that says stats, because I just want my my expressions to use this function and check that the connection is up and running, and I'm just expecting anything that's not an error that comes from here. So this is the stats for a particular collection, and the collection I'm going to be using is the collection webinar. This is basically passed as a string, so I can use collection webinar or whatever this is. For these examples, I'm just going to use the variable name, the collection name here that's defined just on top, so I don't have to write the same string over and over again. So that's basically just on a variable. So I'm just going to type, instead of the string to be evaluated, I'm just going to pass the name of the variable. So click on run, go over to the console. Wait for the microservice to start, and I get the very big result for the stats for this particular collection. So if we try to start reading this JSON, this is basically the result of the JSON, the result of the API of the MongoDB. Blazedpath basically grabs the sentence of the functions that we are using for the collections, for the inserts, for the finds, for the stats, everything. It's just we are just calling the API of MongoDB, and we are giving back to the user the information that comes from the API. So this here looks very complex. It's like at first sight it looks very chaotic, but it's fully documented in the MongoDB documentation page. So as you can see, if we try to start reading it gives us the name of the database and the collection. It gives us the size that the collection is using, and it's telling us how many documents are right now in the collection. So if we go back to the collection and we go collection webinar and we check, we can see that we have two documents that's from a previous tests. So connection is up and running. I previously touched on why it's good that Blazedpath uses both defined objects and dynamically defined objects or weakly typed objects. Is because this structure might change on the next patch of MongoDB, and as long as you know what you are looking for here, you're never gonna have really a problem. The problem comes from the parsing, so as long as you're checking that the property of the object is there, you're gonna be fine. So let me go through a quick example on how you would do that. Basically, on the variable section on the blocky, I'm using a weakly defined object, which is basically of type any. The any type in Blazedpath means that there is no definition or no big defined structure. There can be anything here. So I'm going to store the result of the stats function, and I'm going to store it on the stat results. And on the console log, what I'm going to show is the object stat result.count, because I know from my execution that this property exists, and in this particular case is 2. So if I click on run, I'm going to get on the console log a 2, or I expect to get a 2. And there you go. The start of the microservice MS Mongo is giving me a 2. So that's to be expected. That's how you handle weakly defined objects in Blazedpath, and that gives you a lot of flexibility whenever maybe the document you get from a query from a find, you don't really know what's in there like beforehand. So you just store it on an any object, or maybe the any object is inside another defined object structure, so you can have a lot of flexibility with that. So we now connected to the database, we checked that the connection is working, and we quickly talked about how to store the information from our queries inside an object, and then, like any other programming language, you can do whatever you want or need with that object. So let's go over a couple of examples on what you can do with Blazedpath. Let's first show how to create an index. So to create an index, let me first delete that line, and on this console log I'm going to use a command called MongoDB create index. Click on enter to autocomplete, open the parentheses. So usually with all MongoDB, the first parameter is going to be the particular element you want to execute the query against. In this example, there is only one Mongo database, but if you have several databases, you would get the option here to pass over the different elements. So click on MongoDB, click on comma. The second parameter is going to be the collection name, as we just talked. It's on a variable just above us, and the last parameter is a field or spec of any type. So this particular parameter or field, or whatever you want to call it, it's basically we are grabbing everything that you are passing here. So let's say your instruction is that you want to create a new index. The new index, the index is going to be called name, and then we are going to give the name property a 1. If you already know how to use a MongoDB, you would recognize this way of writing queries and instructions in MongoDB. It's basically they are directly the same from the MongoDB documentation. Let me just open create index MongoDB. So basically, this object is being passed directly onto the MongoDB API. So absolutely all of the options from the MongoDB documentations are going to be available from Blazedpath. So in this example, as you can see, we have the create index function from the MongoDB documentation for a collection. So on this example, I'm creating an index of that's named A, and then it's this one basically means it's ascending, and then there is a couple of other parameters that you can add for this particular index. So basically that's the exact same thing that this other any options parameter from this function. So the Blazedpath documentation for these MongoDB databases, they are not so comprehensive because we want to convey the message that all of the options from the original MongoDB functions are replicated directly into Blazedpath. So if you want to go into a lot of detail on how to do a particular very complex query, as long as you understand how to do it on the MongoDB documentation or a native MongoDB implementation, you're going to be using exactly the same nomenclature here. Just build the object with the query exactly the same, and it's going to work exactly the same. So let's just create this index, click on run. And the reason I'm executing this is so I can then show it to you on the MongoDB webpage in here under indexes. So right now the only index in this collection is the ID, because the ID of a collection is in itself an index. And as you can see in there, I just created the name _1 index, which is basically the formal name of this index. The sorting order is implicit in the name. So if you want to delete this index, you wouldn't use name, just plain name. You would use the name _1 to actually delete the query, the index itself. So let's just go over that quick example. I'm not going to execute it so that we can save a little bit of time. So you would go MongoDB, drop MongoDB, there you go, drop index, MongoDB, use the collection name, oh, there you go, collection name, and in here on the index name, it's expecting a string, and you would use name _1. And whenever you execute this, it's just going to delete this index from the collection. So we know that the connection is working. We've checked that it's actually impacting the database. Let's start doing some more complex things. Let's start by inserting a document. Then I'm going to use a couple of queries to find it. Then I'm going to use an update execution, and then I'm just going to delete it. And that will probably take us the rest of our time. So on the console log, I am going to start from scratch on the expressions editor. So I'm going to go MongoDB, insert one, open parenthesis, the name of the database, the name of the collection, and this is expecting an object with the document I'm going to insert on the database. So the object I'm going to be inserting, I can pass anything in here. So if you have an object that comes from a function and you want to store the information in there, you can just pass the name of the variable. Let's imagine that the stat results contains whatever you want to save. You would just pass the stat results name of the variable to store on the database. Right now, so we can do finds later using queries, I'm going to be using objects defined in this same line. So I'm going to instance a new object to store. So that's with curly braces, with normal JSON syntax. So in here, I'm going to be using a string property, which is going to be with the value of hello live webinar. And my next property, so I can do queries later, I'm going to use number property, and I'm going to be using a value of 150. There you go. I can also start adding other things, like let's say an array. This could be details, and the array is with brackets, so I can start writing anything here. This can be numbers, strings, objects, anything you want. So if I click on run, this is going to be inserting the document on the MongoDB. It's going to give me back the full ID, which is basically a very long alphanumerical number with numbers and letters. And if I go to my webpage and I go find, basically to see the different documents that are stored, you can see here that with we have a new document with the string property, the number property, and the details property. So that's directly adding objects on the database. And I am going to be going through a couple of examples on how to actually find the documents in the database. The easier is just using the ID, so that I'm just going to copy this whole section. I am going to be doing a little bit of work on this output because we are using unescaped JSONs. So I'm going to go MongoDB, find. So find me on this database, on this collection, find me the object that complies with this ID. Basically, we are using double quotes on the expressions editor to show strings, and on the properties we are not using double quotes at all. So that's basically the only difference. Change the simple quotes to double quotes and remove the double quotes from any property. And click on run, go back to the console, and we get the document with the ID, and we get the full spec of the document, which is basically the object with the string property, the number property, and the details. So basically this function is getting an object as the query, the filtering options. Again, I'm going to just repeat it just to make the message very clear. This object is passed over directly to the MongoDB API implementation. So any option that's available on the MongoDB API is available on Blazedpath. Maybe if you click in here on learn more of these functions, this is for those who haven't been able to be with us on previous webinars. Any function you see on the expressions editor, you can click on learn more. This is going to take you to the Blazedpath documentation site. Just of course sign in. And this is going to open the function directly from the Blazedpath documentation, which with all the specs for the function. So if you want to find a certain MongoDB function or any function that's available from the expressions editor, you can come here to the appendix B under essentials, and we are just going to focus on the MongoDB ones for today. We're going to go to functions, and you can see that you have a lot of functions corresponding to inserts, deletes, drops, finds, and so forth. So again, let's quickly go over the find one. Where's the find one? Okay, let's go over the find. So the examples we have here are not so comprehensive, but again, just if you want more examples on how to do any of the options, check the MongoDB documentation. The object we are passing is again directly going to against the MongoDB API, so all the options are going to be available. So that's how you find the document. Let's say you want to find using a query with a condition instead of just looking by ID. So you can go, let's just use the find one, so we do something different. So we go MongoDB, find one, on this database, on this collection name, and on this object I am going to be using the filter that actually says give me everything that's number property with the value of 1, 2, 3. So this would be an exact replica. So this is going to find all of the, I'm sorry, this is the find one function. This is going to be finding the first entry that complies with the number property to be exactly 1, 2, 3. But if you want to give you a condition, let's say greater than a certain number, you would go complying with the MongoDB documentation. You would go, instead of the number, you would open another object and you would go $GT, which means greater than, and let's say 50. If you want to go less than, you would go LT. Again, all of these options are in the MongoDB documentation. So I'm going to relaunch my my solution, so I can get again the other. So this is the first entry of that found that complies with greater than 50. Again, there might be more than one entry, but we are using the function that says find one. If you use the MongoDB find, it's going to give you an array with all the document that complies with greater than 50 on that particular property. So let's say you want to count the amount of documents, like that's basically the same thing that we did with the stats, but there's also another function called MongoDB count documents, and you can do that on the MongoDB database, on this collection name, and you can actually pass over a query to see how many different documents with that particular query there are. So the query itself or the filters would be number property less than let's say 200, just so we can get a lot of results. So click on run. Wait for it to get, and we get 3 entries with that information. So we are going to go over 2 more examples before we wrap up the tutorials for today. We are going to use an update, and then we are going to use a delete, so we can see like the full life cycle of a document. Just get uploaded, updated, read, and then deleted. So go over back to the onStart event, and on the expressions editor, I'm going to go MongoDB, update 1. I'm just going to update the first property, the first document, I'm sorry, on this collection. And this next parameter is the filtering, which is going to be which one I'm going to be getting. I'm going to be using the same filter we did just now, so number property greater than 50, and then I am going to give an object that's basically has the query of what's the writing instructions is for the documents, or in this example the one document that complies with the condition of number property is greater than 50. So the way you write that on MongoDB is basically you open up an object and you go $set, and then we are going to be passing an object with all the values that you want to set on the new object. So number property let me copy paste it, I can write today. So number property, let's just say 250. So the first entry that complies with this is going to come back as 250. Again, that syntax of how to write queries on MongoDB might seem a little bit confusing at first, but it's fully documented in the MongoDB database. So we are just going over the basic ways of executing the different queries, and then if you want to start building your API from scratch and create all the APIs to manage the database, you will probably you will need to go over the extensive documentation of MongoDB to start checking what you actually want to do. So just so we know that we just created the change, I'm going to refresh this page so that we can see the document with the number property equals to 250. So let's wait for a second until the web page opens. And on the collection webinar, you can see here that the very first document that we found has been updated to get the new value. And so again, let's just go over so we have 250, 99, and 150. I'm going to execute a delete many query to delete everything that's less than 100. So let's go back here and start writing MongoDB, delete many on this database, on this collection, and the filtering option I'm going to be using is number property is less than 100. So this would basically delete 2 and just delete the one with 99 and close the parenthesis. Is that right? Yeah. So click on run, wait for it to build and execute the blocky, and I get the results. So if I go back to my database, I deleted just one. Yeah, because the ones that with less than 50 is just one instead of 2. That's my bad. So yeah, that's how you use MongoDB with all the APIs. So we've been through the connection, the checking of the connection, the insert documents, define the stats, the updates, and the deletes. So that should get you started using the MongoDB. It's a very good database. It's very performant. We highly encourage you to start using it and start familiarizing yourself with the NoSQL databases. I am going to go over and try to see if we got any questions on the chat, and I'm going to actually ask Gustavo Marchand, our managing director, to help me with questions because he usually knows more on roadmaps and expectations. Are you there, Gustavo?
Hello. Yes, I'm here. So
yeah,
I guess it's time for Q&A.
Yeah, you don't have the webcam yet. Yeah. Well, anyway, if you're there, let's.
Yeah, I'm here.
There you go. So let me check if there's have you seen the chat, Gustavo? Is there any question there? Let me open it. I have some. Yeah, I have one from Sanjeev. Hi, is there any restrictions on availability of options between Blazedpath and Mongo? I'm sorry I didn't get to answer your question before. I was pretty much in a row with the examples. There's no limitation of options. Basically, whatever you are writing as the filtering and instructions to write, it's all there. The object you are passing. So let me go back to the main develop. There you go. So basically, everything that you are passing over here, there you go. So this object basically has all the options from your query, and this object is passed exactly as is to the MongoDB implementation. So everything that's, you can write anything you want in this particular object. We only check for syntax in Blazedpath. So everything that actually has to do with options, should be interpreted by the MongoDB API. So everything that's available on the MongoDB API is going to be available. So there is no restriction whatsoever. We only check for syntax so that we make sure that if you want to write a number, it's going to be a number. And if you want to write a string, it's going to be a string. That's all the validation we do. The object is passed exactly as is, so it's pretty comprehensive. And yeah, there is no restrictions whatsoever, either on options, filterings, or on the instructions themselves to bulk writes and bulk reads and all of those. Okay, I think I saw one more. Shruti.
Another question
Yeah.
is about other type of non-SQL database support in Blazedpath. Yeah, I can support that. Mongo is the main so far. In the next release, we are actually making available Redis and Hasselgast, mostly for cache purposes, or cache purposes, how it's pronounced. So microservices can use and rely this database to set different cache methods, including storing frequently queried data from microservices and have it more quickly available, respond Redis or Hasselgast. So those two are in the way in the next release, which is going to be in the next week, very soon actually. I think probably today or next week. So the other type of non-relational database is Elasticsearch, and it's also integratable with Blazedpath, and we are in the roadmap for Cassandra, so you'll be able to deploy Cassandra clusters from Blazedpath, also as a non-relational database. Those 5 would be in total. 2 more in the way very shortly, and then Elasticsearch and midterm Cassandra. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Gustavo. I think that's everything for today. Let me quickly close the webinar for today. Thank you for joining us. Just let us know in the comments or in the forums if you have any petition that we cover any particular topic. We look at them every day just in case we can help you guys out with your projects. On our next webinar, we're going to be checking over the very useful debugging tool from the Blazedpath suite, and we are going to be showcasing a couple of examples to use hotkeys to create some block keys and basically use the blocky editor without the mouse, which is very, very handy for some people, me included. So we also, if the time is enough, because we have the implementation to deploy the pods into the Google Cloud, well, we're going to see if we can get that inside the half an hour for the next webinar. Otherwise, it's going to be on the next one. So just remember to subscribe to the channel and give us the like whenever you're watching this webinar. Thank you so much for being here if you made this far, and we'll see each other on the next one.
Remember to create your account of Blazedpath Cloud if you didn't do already. In the next 24 hours, you can get a free 5,000 cloud credits extra. So yeah, that's just for attending this webinar. We're giving that out as a perk. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Gustavo. Thank you, everyone.